My name is Juel Brandt. I'm 23 years old. 3 weeks after my leg surgery, my mother stopped hiding her true intentions. She didn't even try to pull me aside. Right there at the Sunday dinner table, in front of my aunt, my uncle, and Madison, my brother Wesley's girlfriend, she laid it all out. She slid a settlement check for $48,000, made out in my name, across the table to Wesley. Then, loud enough for the whole room to hear, she said, "You're an invalid now, Juel, but Wesley actually has a future. He has a life to build." She glanced at my crutches leaning against the wall and let out a soft scoff. "What are you going to do with this money anyway? Insurance covers your physical therapy. You don't need this." Wesley picked up the check and smiled. Madison stared straight down at her plate. My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Nobody said a word. My dad just stared at his chicken like it owed him money. I didn't even blink. I took a sip of water, carefully setting the glass back down. The ice cubes made a tiny clinking sound against the glass. "Fine," I said calmly. "Go ahead and cash it, but read the memo line first." None of them noticed the phone sitting inside my hoodie pocket. It had been recording everything for the past 47 minutes. That was their first mistake. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. If you're listening to this and already feeling that knot in your stomach, that heavy mix of anger and disbelief when the people who are supposed to protect you completely betray you, take a second to hit the like button. If this story strikes a chord with you, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And I'm really curious, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching this from right now? And what time is it over there? Now let's go back to how this all started. It began on November 15th, 2024 at 7:15 p.m. I was riding my bike home from work down Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis. The bike lane was completely clear. The light was green. I had my reflectors on, and my headlight was bright. I was following every single traffic rule. Then a car door swung wide open. I don't remember the exact moment of impact. I just remember the sound. The sickening crunch of metal against metal, my bike twisting out of shape, and my body hitting the asphalt hard. Then, total darkness. The next thing I knew, sirens were wailing. After that, it was a blur of white ceiling tiles, blinding fluorescent lights, and the face of an EMT asking for my name. "Juel," I mumbled. "Juel Brandt. Do you know what happened, Juel?" Someone opened their door, I hit it. "Can you feel your leg?" I could, which was a good sign. But when I looked down, my right leg was bent at a horrifying angle. The EMT followed my gaze. "Don't move," he said softly. "We're taking you to Abbott Northwestern. You're going to be okay." I remember thinking to myself right then, Mom is going to be furious. I don't even know why that was my very first thought. Maybe because I hadn't even owned the bike for a year. Or maybe because I knew she would somehow find a way to make this whole accident my fault. Either way, as they lifted me into the ambulance, that was what occupied my mind. Not the excruciating pain, not the damage to my leg, just, Mom is going to be furious. The break was severe. A completely displaced compound fracture of the tibia. They rushed me into surgery that same night. It took 3 hours in the operating room to put in a titanium plate and 6 screws. My orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Nathan Rodriguez, told me I was looking at least 6 months of intense physical therapy, if not longer. He was incredibly kind and professional, explaining everything clearly, showing me the x-rays, and walking me through the timeline for my recovery. My mother didn't bother showing up at the hospital until around 2 a.m. She and my dad had been in the waiting room during the operation, but I didn't see them until I woke up in the recovery area. The very first thing I heard through the door was her voice. "How much is this going to cost us?" Not, "Is she okay?" or "Can I see her?" Just, "How much is this going to cost?" When she finally walked into my room, there was no hug. She stood at the foot of the bed, stared at my heavily casted leg, and sighed. "Well, this is going to set us back financially." "Insurance should cover most of it," I croaked, my voice incredibly raspy from the breathing tube. "Should?" she echoed. "It's never that simple, Juel, and you know it." My dad stood right behind her, completely silent. That was his default setting. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Mom visited me twice. The second time was on November 17th. She brought me a change of clothes and immediately brought up the legal settlement. "The driver's insurance company has to pay out," she insisted. "They hit you. It's their fault. You're going to get a settlement." "I haven't really thought about that yet," I replied vaguely. "Well, you need to. This is serious, Juel. This affects your entire life. You need to be smart about this money." I didn't say anything. I was exhausted, and the pain medication made everything feel hazy. I just nodded. She stayed for 20 minutes and left without so much as touching my hand. On November 25th, a letter arrived from State Farm. The driver's liability was clear-cut. The estimated settlement was going to be somewhere between $45,000 and $52,000. Mom intercepted the mail. The letter was addressed to me, but she opened it anyway and read it out loud at the dinner table. $48,000, she said, her voice sounding like she had just won the lottery. Finally, some good news out of this nightmare. I was propped up on the couch, my leg elevated with my crutches sitting nearby. I kept my mouth shut. Wesley was there too, and his eyes immediately lit up. 48 grand? That's a massive amount of money. That's Juel's money, my dad muttered quietly. Mom snapped her head around and glared at him. It's family money. This ordeal has taken a toll on all of us. I took mental note of that phrase, family money. She said it so naturally as if it were an undeniable fact. 2 days later, I overheard their real conversation. By November 28th, I was actually back in the hospital. Because of a high risk of infection, they kept me for an extra week. I was in room 412, supposedly taking a nap. Mom was out in the hallway, on the phone with Wesley. She had no idea I was awake. 48,000, she whispered loudly. The lawyer says the check will clear within 6 weeks. We just need to make sure she understands that this is practically the household's money. There was a pause. No, she's completely out of it right now. The pain meds have her totally confused. She isn't thinking straight. Another pause. Just leave it to me. She'll sign it over to us. She won't fight it. She's never stood up to us a day in her life. I kept my eyes squeezed shut. The heart monitor beeped steadily in the background. She had absolutely no clue I could hear her. When she walked back into the room, she tucked my blanket in with an almost tender care. Then, I heard her mutter under her breath, "At least you're finally useful for something." That night, lying alone in that hospital bed, I pulled out my phone and searched. One-party consent recording laws, Minnesota. The legal answer was crystal clear. Minnesota is a one-party consent state. You can legally record any conversation you are a part of without notifying the other people involved. I downloaded a voice memo app, ran a quick test, and played it back. My own voice sounded small and drained. My name is Juel Brandt. If you are hearing this, it means I am protecting myself. I saved the file directly to the cloud and closed my eyes to sleep. When I finally returned home in early December, I stopped arguing about physical therapy bills, insurance paperwork, or the settlement. I agreed with every single thing my mother said. I nodded. I said, okay, a lot. I acted passive, compliant, and maybe a little slow from the lingering pain. But I wasn't slow at all. I was paying very close attention. On December 1st, I was on the couch doing my physical therapy exercises, flexing my ankle and doing basic quad sets. Mom was in the kitchen, talking to Wesley in hushed tones. My phone was slid face down under a throw pillow, recording every word. What if she says no? Wesley asked. She won't, Mom replied dismissively. She's weak. She's always been weak. We tell her what to do and she does it. Recording number 1. Saved. Uploaded. On December 5th, Mom took me to church for the first time since the accident. I didn't want to go. I was still on crutches and dealing with a lot of pain, but she insisted. Everyone is asking about you, she urged. They want to see that you're all right. During the coffee hour after the service, she intentionally raised her voice so I could hear her from 10 feet away. Yes, it's been incredibly difficult. She can barely walk. The doctors say she might never fully recover. We're trying to stay positive, but we have to face reality. Her whole life is completely altered. The poor thing. The ladies from the church nodded, offering sympathetic murmurs. One woman looked at me with a look of pure pity that made me want to vanish into the floorboards. Later, an older parishioner walked up to me. Your mother is so strong, she said, carrying a heavy burden like this all by herself. You are incredibly blessed to have her. Yes, I replied smoothly, incredibly blessed. I didn't correct her. I just stood there leaning on my crutches, while the phone in my coat pocket captured the entire interaction. Recording number 2. From December 8th to December 14th, I successfully captured my mother coaching, rehearsing, and drilling Wesley on exactly what to say. On December 8th, at 7:30 p.m., I was supposed to be upstairs asleep. They were down in the living room. Don't say take her money, Mom instructed him. Say for the good of the family. Don't say she's broken. Say her recovery won't require this much. Make it sound practical, even loving. What if she starts crying? Wesley asked. Crying means she's breaking down, Mom countered. Let her cry. She'll sign it in the end. Recording number 3. On December 10th, after the formal settlement notice arrived, Barbara and Wesley went over it line by line, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. I snapped a photo of that pad later while it was sitting on the coffee table. It was written entirely in my mother's handwriting. The bullet points read, "Emphasize Wesley's opportunity. Mention Juel's physical limitations. Gentle reminder of the family raising her. If she resists, bring up the burden on the household." Recording number 4 captured her expanding on that last point. "If she fights us, we bring up how much this has cost us. The medical bills, the missed work, everything we've sacrificed." On December 12th, they held a full dress rehearsal. Mom played my part while Wesley practiced his delivery. "Juel, I know this is your money," he said, his voice sounding incredibly stiff like he was reading from a script. "But think about my future, the opportunities I have. You're going to be limited anyway." "Good," Mom interrupted. "But slow down, make it sound warmer, more sorrowful, like you truly care about her circumstances." Wesley tried again. It sounded much more convincing the second time. "Perfect," Mom said. "Sunday night, 5:30 p.m., roasted chicken dinner. Keep it totally casual. We need her to think it's just a normal dinner before we present it to her." Recording number 4. The entire thing, word for word. On December 13th, I met up with Connor at a local coffee shop. Connor Morrison was a former co-worker from my previous job doing medical data entry. He worked in IT security, and he was someone I trusted implicitly. "I need your help," I told him flatly. "I need to secure my cloud storage, all my files, everything." He looked at me intently. "What's going on, Juel?" "I'm protecting myself," I said. "I need these files completely secure, encrypted and hosted on multiple servers. I need them to upload automatically, and I need a dead man switch." "A dead man switch?" "If I don't access my account for 72 consecutive hours," I explained, "these files need to automatically go to 3 specific people. You, my doctor, and a third person I haven't chosen yet, but I'll figure it out." Connor set up the entire system that very afternoon. Every single recording I took would instantly upload to the cloud, fully encrypted, completely backed up, and entirely safe from tampering. "Juel," he asked gently as we finished up, "what exactly are you expecting to happen?" "I'm expecting my family to show me exactly who they are," I said, "and I'm going to have the proof." Later that evening, Mom called my Aunt Carol. I was upstairs with my door cracked open, my phone recording. "I need you and Jim here this Sunday," Mom pleaded. "Just for moral support. We're having a family meeting about Juel's settlement. She hasn't been completely right in the head since the accident, and we need everyone together to help her see what's best." There was a long silence. I could hear Carol's hesitant voice faintly coming through the receiver. "Please, Carol," Mom pushed. "I can't handle this burden alone." Carol agreed. Of course she did. Mom was always masterful at making herself look like the reasonable one. Sunday, December 15th, 2024, 5 p.m. I arrived early. My dad had picked me up since I still couldn't drive. The table was completely set, 6 place settings. A chicken was roasting in the oven, filling the entire house with the scent of rosemary and garlic. It felt incredibly cozy, totally normal, and completely suffocating. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim arrived at 5:15 p.m. Carol gave me a very fragile hug, treating me like I was made of glass. Jim shook my hand firmly. "How are you holding up, kiddo?" he asked. "I'm doing okay," I said. Wesley and Madison arrived at 5:28 p.m. Wesley gave me a tight squeeze. "Love you, sis," he whispered. I didn't say it back. He didn't even notice. We all took our seats. Mom insisted I sit at the head of the table. "You're our guest of honor tonight," she smiled. By 5:13 p.m., before anyone had even walked through the door, I had already started the recording. The phone sat deeply in my hoodie pocket, the microphone facing outward. The dinner started off completely normal. We talked about the weather, Wesley's training schedule at the gym, and Mom's church committees. Madison asked how my physical therapy was going, and I told her it was moving along smoothly. Everyone nodded along supportively. Then, at 6:02 p.m., Mom cleared her throat. "So, Juel," she began, "we need to discuss something important." The entire table fell completely silent, like they had all been waiting for this exact cue. "Your settlement came through," Mom said. $48,000. It's absolutely wonderful. We are all so incredibly grateful. She picked up the check and slid it directly across the table to Wesley. The check was printed on heavy, security-grade paper, the kind banks use that you can't easily duplicate. I could clearly see the State Farm logo. My name was right there. Juel M. Brandt. Wesley looked down at the check, then looked up at me. "Juel," he said, using that soft, rehearsed tone. "I know this is technically your money, but I've been thinking a lot about it. I have some major business opportunities, investments, a real future ahead of me. And you, well, you're going to be facing some limitations from here on out." Mom immediately chimed in. "You're an invalid now, sweetheart. We have to face reality. Wesley has his whole life ahead of him. He has a life to build." She cast a pointed look at my crutches leaning against the wall behind me. "What are you going to do with this money anyway?" she asked. "Insurance covers your physical therapy. You don't need this." Madison stared straight down at her plate, her fork frozen mid-air. I saw her shoot a quick, guilty glance in my direction before looking right back down. The recording later picked up her quiet whisper to Wesley. "Babe, this doesn't feel right. Wesley, don't do this." Aunt Carol shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but she stayed silent. Uncle Jim cleared his throat. "Barbara," he said quietly, "this doesn't seem right." Mom shot him an incredibly icy glare. He immediately looked down, focusing on his food. Nobody else spoke. My dad just stared at his chicken. Over the course of the entire dinner, he said exactly 6 words. "Pass the salt," and "This tastes great." I took a slow sip of my water. The ice clinked against the glass. Every single eye in the room was fixed on me. "Juel," Mom pressed, "say something." "What do you want me to say?" I asked quietly. "Say you understand," Wesley urged. "Say you'll sign it over to me." "Don't be selfish," Mom added. "This family has given you everything. Now it's your turn to contribute." There was a heavy silence. It lasted for 8 full seconds. The recording captured that empty space perfectly. The only sound was a fork hitting a plate, and someone's shallow breathing. Then my mother delivered the final blow. "You're an invalid anyway, Juel. What are you honestly going to do with $48,000? You're never going to have the kind of life Wesley is going to have. Your place is here at home. Let's just be realistic." Wesley picked the check up off the table. Madison closed her eyes tightly. Carol let out a tiny, shaky breath. Not a gasp, just a long exhale. I set my water glass down firmly. "Fine," I said. "Go cash it." Mom smiled instantly. Wesley grinned. They genuinely thought they had won. "But read the memo line first," I added. Wesley looked back down at the check, squinting his eyes. "It just says a bunch of legal jargon." "Read it out loud," I challenged. "Payable solely to Juel Brandt," he read aloud. "Endorsement requires 2 forms of identification, plus a notarized affidavit of sole ownership. Any unauthorized attempt to cash will be automatically reported to the State Attorney General." He looked up, his smile fading. "We'll just figure it out. We'll go to the bank tomorrow. You'll come with us and sign whatever they need you to sign." "Okay," I said quietly. Mom let out a massive sigh of relief. "Good girl, this is for the best." "You'll see that, Juel." I excused myself from the table, claiming my leg was throbbing. Nobody tried to stop me. I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and hit stop on the recording. 47 minutes and 16 seconds. I plugged my phone into the charger and watched as the file successfully uploaded, encrypted, and saved into the cloud backup. Then I lay down on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I didn't shed a single tear. I just let the reality of it wash over me. They actually did it. They really went through with it. Every suspicion I had, every fear I held onto was entirely accurate. I opened up my notes app and typed out, December 15th, 2024. Recording number 5. Evidence of financial coercion, discriminatory language regarding disability, a premeditated attempt to misappropriate funds, and exploitation of a vulnerable relative. Witnesses present. Carol, Jim, Madison, Dad, all present, mostly silent. I saved the note and shot a quick text to Connor. "It's done." He replied almost instantly. "Oh my God, are you okay?" "Yes." "What now?" "Now," I replied. "I wait." On December 17th at 10 a.m., Wesley went to the Wells Fargo on Hennepin Avenue by himself. Mom was at work, and he genuinely thought this was going to be an easy payday. It wasn't. The teller asked for identification, and he handed over his own. "I need to see ID for Juel Brandt," she told him. "She's my sister," Wesley replied, his tone already getting defensive. "She's dealing with some mobility issues and couldn't make it. I'm cashing it on her behalf." "I still need her ID," the teller insisted, "and a notarized affidavit from her authorizing you to transact on her account." Wesley immediately lost his temper and demanded to see a manager. That brought out Stephanie Marshall, the bank manager. She was in her late 40s, incredibly professional and not someone to be trifled with. She looked over the check, read the memo line, and then stared Wesley right in the eye. "Sir," she said firmly, "no one can cash this check except the payee. The memo line is incredibly explicit. Any attempt to bypass these instructions can be flagged as attempted fraud. I am legally required to log this unauthorized attempt." "Log it?" Wesley scoffed. "I'm her brother. She wants me to have the money." "Then she needs to come in herself," Stephanie stated, "with 2 forms of identification and a notarized statement. Otherwise, I cannot process this." Wesley stormed out of the building. 15 minutes later, Stephanie called me directly. The insurance company had placed a security flag on my account, listing her number as a contact. "Miss Brandt," she said, "someone just tried to cash your settlement check. A male in his early 20s claiming to be your brother. I denied the transaction and logged the incident. Do you want me to file a formal report?" I was sitting on my couch doing my physical therapy exercises with the phone on speaker. "Yes," I said. "Please document every single detail." "I'm also required to notify the insurance company's compliance department," she added. "They take potential fraud very seriously." "Perfect," I said. By 2 p.m., Wesley and Mom burst through the front door, absolutely furious. I stayed right where I was on the couch as they stood over me, practically vibrating with rage. "What did you do?" Mom demanded. "The bank wouldn't touch the check," Wesley snapped. "I didn't do anything," I replied calmly. "That's just how the check was issued." "You set us up," Wesley sneered. "No," I countered. "I told you to read the memo line." Mom's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. "Fine. We are going to the bank together tomorrow. You are going to sign the proper legal paperwork to transfer those funds over to us." "Okay," I said. That one word, "okay," was my secret weapon. It diffused their anger faster than any argument ever could, making them think they were still in control. Recording number 6, 18 minutes, saved and uploaded. The next morning, December 18th, I called a lawyer referral service. I specifically requested an attorney who specialized in disability rights and financial exploitation. They gave me a name, Lisa Brennan. I scheduled an appointment for January 6th. It was far enough out to avoid raising my mother's suspicions, but close enough to get me legal protection before things spiraled. "This needs to be completely confidential," I told the receptionist. "My family cannot find out." "Understood," she assured me. "Attorney-client privilege applies the moment you walk through our doors." Right as I hung up, Mom walked into the living room, eyes narrowed. "Who was that?" "The insurance company," I lied smoothly. "Just following up on the physical therapy coverage." "Oh, good," she said, instantly relaxing. As long as I gave her short, compliant answers, she believed whatever I said. On December 22nd, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Ashley Peterson, my primary care physician at Abbott Northwestern. "Juel," she said, her voice laced with concern. "I wanted to give you a heads up. Your mother called my office yesterday. She demanded access to your medical records, claiming she needs to manage your care. She also explicitly asked for documentation stating that you are suffering from cognitive impairment due to the accident." I froze. "What did you tell her?" "Absolutely nothing," Dr. Peterson replied. "HIPAA laws strictly prohibit me from releasing your records without your written consent. But Juel, she was incredibly aggressive. She kept bringing up the word guardianship." Guardianship. The word felt like a bucket of ice water poured down my spine. "Can you document that call?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's already logged," Dr. Peterson said. Time-stamped at 3:15 p.m. on December 21st. I wrote down her exact words. She said, and I quote, "My daughter is not stable right now. The accident affected her judgment. I need proof of cognitive decline to protect her assets." I documented it because it immediately raised a red flag for me. "Can I get a copy of that log? I'll print it out for you at your next follow-up. And Juel, if anyone ever forces this to a courtroom, I will happily testify about your mental state. You are one of the most clear-headed, sharpest patients I've seen. I will say that under oath." "Thank you. One more thing," she added. "To completely protect you, I want to conduct a formal cognitive assessment. If anyone tries to challenge your competency, you'll have an official medical shield." On December 23rd, I went back to Abbott Northwestern. Dr. Peterson administered 2 rigorous tests, the mini mental state examination and the Montreal cognitive assessment. I scored a perfect, flawless score on both. She handed me a sealed envelope. "Keep this safe. If anyone questions your mind, this is your armor." Inside was an official evaluation on hospital letterhead stating, "No evidence of cognitive impairment detected. Patient exhibits superior executive functioning, memory retention, and decision-making capabilities." That night was Christmas Eve. Mom walked into my room and handed me a medical release form, casually claiming it was required by the insurance company. I took the time to read through it line by line. It wasn't an insurance form at all. It was a sweeping, all-inclusive medical power of attorney. If I signed it, she would gain complete control over every piece of my medical and psychological data. "No," I said, handing it back. "I'm not signing this. This isn't from the insurance company. Where did you actually get this?" She stammered, completely caught off guard. You need someone to help manage your care." "I'm 23, I said coldly. "I'm managing just fine on my own." She slammed the door as she walked out. Recording number 7, 12 minutes. I took a picture of the document and texted it to Connor. "Is this legal?" "It's a standard power of attorney form," he texted back. "But if you sign that, she controls your entire life. Medical, psychological, financial, everything. Do not sign a single thing." I didn't. On January 6, 2025, at 10 a.m., I called an Uber to downtown Minneapolis. I told Mom I was heading out to a physical therapy session. Instead, I walked into Lisa Brennan's office on Marquette Avenue, Suite 900. The office was quiet, professional, and secure. I took a seat across from her desk. "Tell me what's going on," she said. "Can I just play something for you?" I asked. I hit play on the Sunday dinner recording. The full, unedited 47 minutes. Lisa's expression completely shifted around the 12-minute mark. By minute 30, she was furiously scribbling notes. When the audio finally stopped, she looked up at me with absolute seriousness. "This is textbook financial abuse," she stated. "And in the state of Minnesota, attempting to coerce a vulnerable adult into signing over assets is a criminal offense." "How many of these recordings do you have?" she asked. 7 so far, I replied. She leaned back in her chair. "They are going to escalate this, and when they do, they are going to make a critical legal mistake. Keep recording. Track every single interaction. If they file for guardianship, which I strongly suspect they will, we will be completely prepared. Do you have a safe place to go if things get dangerous?" I didn't, at least not yet. "We'll figure that out," she promised. On January 8th, Connor and I met up at another coffee shop. He completely upgraded my digital security, handing me a new protocol. "The dead man's switch is fully live," he explained. "If you don't check into the secure portal for 72 hours, the entire archive automatically forwards to 3 people, me, your lawyer, and your doctor. You're protected, Juel." "Do you think they would actually try to hurt me physically?" I asked quietly. He paused, looking uneasy. "I don't know, but we aren't taking any chances." On January 10th, Mrs. Kowalski knocked on my apartment door. She lived right below us, a kind-hearted widow in her late 70s. "Sweetheart, I don't mean to pry," she began gently, "but I can hear things through the building vents, the way your mother speaks to you. It's terrible. If you ever need a quiet, safe place to sit for a few hours, my door is always unlocked for you." I swallowed hard, barely able to find my voice. "And if you ever need someone to stand up in a courtroom and testify about what they say when they think no one is listening," she added, "I'm old, dear. I don't scare easily." I thanked her from the bottom of my heart. She squeezed my hand tightly before walking back downstairs. Allies. I was building an army of allies. On January 15th, the certified mail arrived. Petition for emergency guardianship, Hennepin County Court. Case number 27-PR-25-1893. Petitioner, Barbara Brandt. Respondent, Juel M. Brandt. I read the paperwork twice, my hands trembling uncontrollably. For the first time, genuine terror set in. Attached was my mother's signed affidavit. She claimed under oath that I had suffered a severe traumatic brain injury in the accident, leaving me with diminished financial capacity and highly susceptible to exploitation. She listed 4 specific instances of my supposed cognitive disorientation. 1. On December 20th, she left the stove burning for 3 hours, nearly causing a catastrophic house fire. 2. On December 28th, she completely forgot to take her critical medications for 4 consecutive days. 3. On January 3rd, she attempted to drive to a familiar location, became completely disoriented, and called me crying, entirely lost. 4. On January 10th, she demonstrated total amnesia regarding a detailed conversation from the previous evening. Every single syllable was a complete fabrication. On December 20th, I was at the physical therapy clinic the entire afternoon. I had digital sign-in logs and witnesses. On December 28th, my phone logs showed automated medication reminders that I checked off perfectly on time, complete with immutable digital timestamps. On January 3rd, I hadn't even been medically cleared to drive yet. I wasn't even allowed to bear weight on my leg, a fact my medical records proved indisputably. And on January 10th, I had a digital audio recording proving my memory of our conversation was absolutely flawless. She had fabricated the entire thing out of thin air. I called Lisa immediately. She filed it, I breathed down the line. The emergency guardianship. I know, Lisa replied calmly. I just received the electronic notification. Here is exactly how this plays out. The court will automatically mandate a psychological evaluation. You are going to pass it with flying colors. We will counter with Dr. Peterson's cognitive assessment, and then we will introduce the audio recordings proving her sole motivation is the settlement money, not your protection. What if the judge believes her lies? Then we will play the recording of her calling you a useless invalid while trying to intercept your check right in open court. Judges absolutely despise predators who target someone's livelihood. There was a brief pause. Juel, Lisa said seriously, I need you to do something incredibly difficult. For the next 3 weeks leading up to the hearing, you need to be absolutely flawless. Go to every single physical therapy session. Keep a meticulous journal of your recovery. Stay completely calm, collected, and cooperative with everyone, except them. Can you do that? Yes, I said. On January 16th, we held an emergency meeting at Lisa's office. She had prepared a mountain of counter-evidence for every single lie in the affidavit. We had bulletproof receipts, physical therapy attendance records, automated medication logs, medical documentation, and the recordings. This isn't just an abusive guardianship petition anymore, Lisa noted. This is perjury. She lied under oath on a legal document. That is a felony. Add it to the pile, I replied. On January 22nd, I underwent the court-ordered psychological evaluation. It was conducted by Dr. Melissa Grant and consisted of 2 grueling hours of cognitive tests, financial management scenarios, and competency assessments. Near the end of the evaluation, she looked up from her clipboard. Can you tell me why your mother believes you require a legal guardian? She wants total control over my accident settlement, I stated plainly. She believes that because I have a physical injury, I don't deserve the money. Do you have any proof to substantiate that claim? I have 18 digital audio recordings, I told her. Dr. Grant made a detailed note. Then, dropping her professional demeanor for just a moment, she looked at me kindly. You are one of the most competent, articulate individuals I have evaluated all year. Your mother is going to face an impossible battle trying to prove you are incapacitated. Her official report was submitted to the court on February 1st. Comprehensive evaluation reveals absolutely zero evidence of cognitive decline, traumatic brain injury sequelae, or diminished capacity. The respondent demonstrates exceptional clarity, insight, and executive functioning. The respondent is entirely capable of managing her own affairs. This evaluator finds absolutely no basis for establishing a guardianship. Furthermore, the respondent provided credible evidence suggesting the petitioner's motives may be financial rather than protective. Dismissal of the petition is strongly recommended. Lisa texted me the second the document cleared. We got the report. It's a total victory. Now we just wait for their move. They are going to panic. She was exactly right. From January 25th to the 30th, Mom dialed up the pressure significantly. She cornered me daily, demanding I sign a financial power of attorney to avoid going to court. Recording number 12 captured the desperation. If you just act reasonable, we can drop this entire court matter, Mom pressured. Just sign the power of attorney, give Wesley what he needs to secure his future. Stop being so incredibly selfish. No, I replied flatly. The judge is going to find you incompetent anyway, she warned, her voice rising. You're just humiliating yourself. Okay, I said. On January 30th at 11 p.m., Wesley showed up at my apartment completely intoxicated, pounding furiously on my front door. Give us the money, he screamed through the wood. Give us the check. Downstairs, Mrs. Kowalski immediately called the police. I kept my phone recording the entire time. For 15 minutes, his enraged voice echoed through the hallway, shouting threats and obscenities. The police arrived and escorted him off the property. Officer Dawson filed a formal incident report under tracking number 2025-013894. I handed a certified copy right over to Lisa. On February 3rd, a direct message popped up on my Instagram from a girl named Sierra M. "You don't know me," the message read. "I dated your brother last year. I need to show you something. He is a terrible person, and so is your mother." She attached screenshots of text messages spanning from October to December of 2024. One thread from Wesley read, "Wesley, my mom has a foolproof plan to secure the funds from my sister's accident. The settlement money. We're going to be set." Sierra, "That is completely messed up." Wesley, "She doesn't need the cash anyway. She's basically a write-off now." Sierra added, "I broke up with him right after that conversation. It made me sick to my stomach. I should have told you sooner. I'm so sorry." I forwarded every single screenshot to Lisa. "This is definitive proof of premeditated conspiracy," Lisa said, her eyes lighting up. "Will she testify to the authenticity of these texts?" I messaged Sierra back and she didn't hesitate. "Yes, I absolutely will." On February 6th, Mom received a formal notice from the Human Resources Department of the manufacturing company where she worked. They were launching an investigation into an employee conduct violation. Connor had submitted an anonymous compliance report, attaching a secure link to a few select audio files of her behavior. Company policy dictated that any HR employee facing credible allegations of exploitation or abusive behavior, even outside of work hours, had to be immediately suspended pending a full internal review. Mom was walked out of the building. Minutes later, Wesley left a raging voicemail on my phone. "What did you do? Mom got suspended. They're accusing her of abuse. This is entirely your fault." Recording number 16, saved and stored. On February 7th, my phone rang again. It was Aunt Carol. "Juel," she said, her voice shaking. "It's Aunt Carol. I need to apologize to you." I stayed completely silent, letting the line hang. "I sat at that table during dinner," she whispered, crying. "I heard exactly what your mother said to you. I should have stood up. I should have said something. I was a coward." "Why are you calling me now?" I asked coldly. "Because I just found out she filed for guardianship. That isn't protection, Juel. That is a hostile takeover. If you need me to stand up in court and tell the judge exactly what happened at that dinner, I will do it. Jim will do it too. We were both there. We heard every word." "Thank you," I said softly. "I'm so incredibly sorry I stayed silent that night. Your uncle tried, you know. He said this doesn't seem right," I remembered. "Your mother glared at him and he completely backed down. We both did. We failed you." I added their names directly to our witness list. By February 10th, Wesley was fired from his job at the gym. Management cited conduct detrimental to the business. Someone who followed Sierra on social media also knew the gym manager, and word traveled fast. Wesley went on Facebook and posted a furious public status. "Family is supposed to have your back. Instead, my own sister completely ruined my life over a paycheck. Hope you're happy, Juel." The comments flooded in. A few people offered blind support, but several mutual family friends commented, "There is definitely a lot more to this story than you're letting on, Wes." 2 days later, on February 12th, Mom called me directly for the first time in weeks. Her entire tone had shifted. She sounded soft, desperate, and entirely apologetic. Recording number 17. "Juel, sweetie, I think we just got off on the wrong foot from the very start. I was just trying to help you manage everything. I'm your mother. I love you. Can we please just sit down and talk?" "Talk about what?" "This guardianship matter. Let's just drop the whole thing. You keep your settlement money. We'll find another way to handle things." "Okay," I said. "Okay, wonderful. Will you tell your lawyer to dismiss the counterclaims?" "No," I clarified calmly. "My okay just means I hear you talking." There was a sharp intake of breath, and then her voice completely morphed. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. "You ungrateful, spiteful little brat. After everything I sacrificed to raise you, you are going to regret this. You are going to end up completely alone, a broken nobody with absolutely nothing to your name. Mark my words, you'll wish you had listened to me." "Maybe," I said smoothly. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. She kept calling back for 8 solid minutes, screaming into the voicemail network. Every single second was captured by the system. On February 16th, Mom took to Facebook to write one final public post. "Sometimes you sacrifice your entire life for your children, only to be repaid with utter cruelty. Since her accident, my daughter hasn't been working and hasn't been in her right mind. For weeks, I have tried everything to protect her from making catastrophic financial decisions, but instead of gratitude, I am met with lawyers and baseless accusations. My heart is completely broken. praying for families dealing with adult children who turn on the very parents trying to save them. #BrokenMother, #FamilyFirst, #God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers. It received 43 likes, 28 comments, and 6 shares. Connor archived the entire post and the comment section before she panicked and deleted it. One comment from a former neighbor read, "Barbara, this really doesn't sound like the whole truth." Mom had replied, "You have absolutely no idea the nightmare I am living through." The post stayed up for 2 days before vanishing. Too late. We already had the certified screenshots. On February 18th, my dad called me. "Juel, can we talk?" "No," I told him flatly, "but you can listen to this." I sent a secure Dropbox link directly to his phone. It was the Sunday dinner audio file. "What is this?" he asked. "December 15th, I told him. "The night you sat there completely silent and watched Mom and Wesley try to strip away my livelihood. I want you to listen to it in its entirety, then decide if you ever need to call my number again." I ended the call. 2 hours later, his name flashed on my screen again. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, I could hear him sobbing uncontrollably. "I listened to it," he choked out through tears. "Oh my God, Juel, I listened to the whole thing. I am so incredibly sorry. I was a coward. I've always been a coward. I didn't know how to... I am so sorry." I saved the voicemail but didn't text him back. On February 20th, Madison officially broke up with Wesley. She sent him a long text message, which he furiously forwarded to me in a rage. It read, "I can't do this anymore, Wesley. What your family tried to do to your sister is absolutely stomach-turning. What you did is disgusting. We are completely over." Wesley attached a text of his own below it. "Look what you did. You ruined my relationship too. Hope you're proud of yourself." I left him on red. On February 28th, Lisa and I held our final pre-mediation strategy session. We organized the evidence into an undeniable mountain of proof. 18 digital recordings, Dr. Grant's court assessment, Dr. Peterson's HIPAA violation logs, bank transaction records, Wesley's police report, Sierra's text messages, Mrs. Kowalski's signed declaration, and Carol and Jim's formal witness statements. "We are heading into a mandatory mediation hearing," Lisa explained, "but I don't intend to settle. Our real goal is to lay our entire hand face up on the table. We want to force them to withdraw the petition immediately. If they refuse, we go straight to a full trial on March 10th. She looked at me intently. "Are you truly ready for them to hear these recordings? To hear their own voices played back to them?" I didn't blink. "I've been ready since December 15th, I said. March 10th, 2025, 10 a.m. Hennepin County Family Court, Mediation Room 3B. Present in the room, myself, Lisa, Mom, her court-appointed counsel, Wesley, and the mediation judge, the Honorable Patricia Morrison. A long oak conference table split the room, with recording equipment running to log the official transcript. Mom and Wesley sat on one side, Lisa and I sat on the other. Judge Morrison flipped through the thick case file. "We are here today to determine if a legal guardianship is necessary for the respondent. Ms. Brennan, you represent the defense." "Yes, Your Honor," Lisa stated clearly. "And we have overwhelming evidence to demonstrate that this petition is completely groundless and was filed with the sole intent of financial exploitation." Judge Morrison turned her gaze to Mom's attorney. "I have thoroughly reviewed Dr. Grant's independent medical evaluation. The report states there is absolutely no basis for a guardianship. Does your client wish to withdraw the petition at this time?" The attorney glanced at Mom, who sat up straight, defiant. "No, Your Honor, we stand by the petition." "Your Honor," Lisa interrupted smoothly, "may I present our initial evidence?" "Proceed." Lisa opened her laptop and connected it directly to the room's central speaker system. "This is an audio recording from the Brandt family Sunday dinner on December 15th, 2024. It was legally captured by the respondent Juel Brandt under Minnesota's one-party consent statute." She played a condensed 12-minute clip containing the most critical moments of that night. Mom's voice filled the room. "You're an invalid now. Wesley actually has a future." Wesley's voice followed. "You're going to be facing some limitations from here on out." Mom's voice snapped, "Don't be selfish." And then, the worst of it cut through the speakers. "You're an invalid anyway, Juel. What are you honestly going to do with $48,000? Your place is here at home. Let's just be realistic." When the audio cut out, the room fell into a deathly, suffocating silence. Judge Morrison stared directly at my mother. "Is that your voice, Ms. Brandt?" Mom's face went completely pale. We were just having a private family discussion. This is being taken entirely out of context." "Out of context?" the judge questioned, her eyebrows arching. "Ms. Brennan, do you have further evidence?" "We have 17 additional recordings, Your Honor," Lisa responded coolly. "But for the sake of time, I will only play 3 more." She hit play on the rehearsal recording from December 10th, where Mom was actively coaching Wesley on his lines. Mom's recorded voice echoed clearly. "Don't say take her money, say for the good of the family. Don't say she's broken, say her recovery won't require this much. Make it sound practical, even loving. If she starts crying, crying means she's breaking down." Mom's attorney began shifting uncomfortably in his chair, refusing to look at his own client. Judge Morrison frowned deeply. "This was recorded 4 days prior to the family dinner?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lisa confirmed. "It demonstrates clear, calculated premeditation." Finally, Lisa played the phone call from February 12th, the moment my mother's mask completely shattered. The audio blared, "You ungrateful, spiteful little brat. After everything I sacrificed to raise you, you are going to end up completely alone, a broken nobody with absolutely nothing to your name." The 3-minute distillation captured the absolute venom in her voice. Judge Morrison didn't say a word for a long time. She slowly closed the case file, leaned forward, and looked directly at Mom and Wesley. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. The trap had sprung, the evidence was absolute, and justice was finally coming. When the recording stopped, a heavy silence settled over the room for 15 seconds. Judge Morrison looked directly at my mother. "Ms. Brandt, this phone call took place just 3 weeks ago, right around the same time you filed a petition with this court claiming you were acting out of love and a desire to protect your daughter." My mother said absolutely nothing. "We are going to take a 15-minute recess," the judge announced. "When I return, we will discuss the next steps in this matter. Ms. Brandt, I strongly advise you to utilize this time to speak with your legal counsel." With that, she stepped down from the bench. Lisa and I walked out into the hallway. She asked me how I was holding up, and I told her I was doing fine. That was when I noticed my dad. He had been waiting outside the room the entire time. He took a few steps toward me. "Juel." "Not right now, Dad." "I heard it," he said, pointing back toward the door. "I heard her voice. I heard the things she said to you." He was crying. "I know," I replied flatly. 15 minutes later, we reconvened in the mediation room. My mother's attorney immediately stood up. "Your Honor, after consulting with my client, we have decided to formally withdraw the petition for guardianship." "The withdrawal is noted and entered into the record," Judge Morrison said. "However, I am not finished. Ms. Brennan, you previously brought forth evidence regarding potential financial exploitation. I am officially referring this matter to Adult Protective Services for a comprehensive investigation." She then turned her gaze entirely on my mother. "Furthermore, Ms. Brandt, I have reviewed your signed affidavit. You claimed under penalty of perjury that 4 distinct incidents of cognitive impairment took place. Ms. Brennan has provided irrefutable evidence refuting every single one of those claims. Under Minnesota Statute Section 609.48, this constitutes perjury. I am referring this file to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office for formal review." Lisa had already submitted the counter evidence into the record. The physical therapy logs from December 20th, the medication tracking logs from December 28th, the medical documentation proving I wasn't even cleared to drive on January 3rd, and the audio recording from January 10th proving my memory was entirely intact. Judge Morrison looked sternly at my mother. "You fabricated evidence to support your petition." I must have just mixed up the dates," my mother stammered, her voice shaking. "You mixed up 4 separate dates, each complete with highly specific fabricated details?" My mother's lawyer stood up once again. "Your Honor, may I request a brief moment alone with my client?" "You have 5 minutes," the judge replied. "But understand this. If Ms. Brandt wishes to file for a restraining order, I am prepared to grant it immediately. Juel, do you wish to request a restraining order at this time?" I looked over at my mother, then at Wesley. Finally, I looked back at the judge. "Not at this moment, Your Honor," I said. "But I want it officially noted in the court record that if they ever attempt to contact me again, I will file for one immediately." Judge Morrison nodded. "It is so entered. This matter is concluded. The petition is dismissed, and the investigative referrals stand." She gave me one final look before leaving. "You are 23 years old. You survived a severe accident, major surgery, months of grueling rehabilitation, and a profound betrayal by your own family. Yet, you documented everything. That took extraordinary courage and an incredibly sharp mind. I wish you the absolute best of luck." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. When we walked outside the courthouse, Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim were waiting for me. They had come to support me and testify if it had been necessary. The moment my mother saw them, her face drained of all color. Carol walked up and hugged me. "We are entirely on your side," she said. I thanked her sincerely. My dad was still hanging back. He waited until my mother and Wesley had completely cleared out before he finally approached me. "Can we talk now?" he asked quietly. "What do you want to say, Dad?" "I'm leaving her. I filed the legal separation papers this morning. I should have done this years ago. I should have protected you, but I didn't. I was a coward." "Yes," I looked him in the eye. "You were." He flinched slightly at my words. "But you're standing here now," I continued, "and I suppose that's a start. If you want to rebuild a relationship with me, you are going to have to earn it. That means you go to therapy. Not couples counseling, just you on your own. And it also means you never make excuses for her actions again. Can you do that?" "I'll try," he whispered. "Trying isn't enough. Call me when you've been in consistent therapy for a month. We'll take it from there." If you've ever found yourself wishing you had hard evidence of what someone put you through, take a brief second to type the word "recorded" in the comments below. On March 15th at 2:17 a.m., my phone lit up. It was a long text message from my dad. I listened to all of them. Lisa forwarded me the secure link to the cloud archive. I listened to every single recording. I heard myself sitting there at dinner while your mother completely tore you down. I heard myself saying absolutely nothing. I heard exactly how I became an accomplice to it all. I never realized I was that person, and I don't want to be that person anymore. I am so incredibly sorry. You deserved so much better, Juel. You've deserved better your entire life. I failed you, and I was a coward. But I am finally walking away. I filed the separation paperwork, and I'm moving out tomorrow morning. I don't know if this means anything to you, but I needed you to know. I read the text at 6:30 a.m. I read it 3 times. Then I went to my physical therapy session and spent the rest of the day processing it. On March 18th, I finally replied, "Okay, just one word." An hour later, I followed up with another text. "Go to therapy, Dad. Real therapy. Call me when you've stuck with it for 3 months." His response came back instantly. "I will, I promise." I didn't reply after that. On March 20th, he sent me a photograph. It was a picture of a moving truck filled with his personal belongings, pulling away from the house. The caption read, "This is my proof that I'm leaving. This is me choosing you, even if it's 23 years too late. I'm staying at my brother's place for now. I start therapy next week. I found a professional who specializes in family dynamics and enabling behavior. I'm going to do things right this time." I saved the photo to my phone. I didn't text him back, but I didn't delete it either. On March 30th, during my physical therapy session, I took 8 full steps completely independent of my crutches. It was the first time since the accident. My therapist, Ryan Harper, looked at me with a proud smile and said, "You did it, Juel." I started crying right there on the clinic floor, not from the pain, but from the overwhelming weight of everything lifting off my shoulders. "Yes," I choked out, "I did." By the time April arrived, I used a portion of my settlement money, which had finally been safely deposited into my new personal bank account, to rent a modest 1-bedroom apartment in St. Paul, about 15 minutes outside of Minneapolis. It was incredibly close to my rehabilitation clinic. The address was 712 Selby Avenue, up on the 2nd floor. It had beautiful hardwood floors and massive windows that let in the morning light. The rent was $1,100 a month. The leasing agent looked over my paperwork and smiled. "You're one of my youngest solo tenants. Most people your age look for roommates to split the costs." "I need a space that is entirely my own," I told him. "I just need some quiet." On my very first night in the apartment, I sat right on the living room floor. I didn't even have furniture yet. It was just me and the silence. There were no heavy footsteps pacing upstairs, no bitter arguments echoing through the walls. Just complete peace. I started crying again, but this time it was pure relief. On April 8th, Lisa sent a formal registered letter through their attorney to my mother and Wesley. It was an official notice stating that Juel M. Brandt did not consent to any form of contact with Barbara Brandt or Wesley Brandt. Any attempt to reach out, whether by phone, email, text, social media, a third-party messenger, or an in-person encounter, would result in an immediate application for a permanent restraining order. The letter explicitly warned them that all 18 audio recordings and compiled evidence would be brought before a judge, and any violation of this boundary would result in the recordings being made entirely public. The document required 3 signatures to be fully binding: my mother's, Wesley's, and their legal counsel's. All 3 of them signed it on April 12th. There was no written rebuttal, no argument, just absolute dead silence. By April 15th, I had a brand new phone number and a completely overhauled contact list. It contained exactly 7 names: Lisa, Connor, Dr. Peterson, Ryan, Mrs. Kowalski, the physical therapy clinic, and my dad. I had systematically pared down my connections from 47 people to just those 7. I deleted all my old social media profiles, registered a new private email address, and completely started over. My old phone sat turned off in the back of a drawer, safely preserved as a legal backup but completely silent. As April transitioned into May, I found myself waiting for my mother or Wesley to cross the line. But they never did. The silence remained absolute. "They're terrified," Lisa told me during a check-in. "They know the legal leverage is entirely in your hands now. Total compliance is their only real option." On May 1st, I realized something incredible. I had gone an entire 24 hours without thinking about them once. Later that month, I decided to enroll in a weekend intensive certification program to become an adaptive fitness trainer, focusing on helping individuals with physical injuries rebuild their physical mobility. During the orientation, the instructor asked me what motivated me to pursue this line of work. "Because I know exactly what it feels like when your body lets you down," I explained to the group. "And I also know what it feels like when the people closest to you do the exact same thing. I want to help people rebuild their strength and their boundaries at the same time." My very first client was a woman recovering from a severe spinal injury. Her family was actively pressuring her to accept her physical limitations as permanent and sign her insurance payouts over to them. I listened to her story, reached into my bag, and handed her Lisa's professional business card. "Would you like to know how to protect yourself?" I asked her gently. Toward the end of May, Ryan asked me out for coffee. Not as my physical therapist, but simply as himself. "I know the timing might feel a bit complicated," he admitted, looking a bit nervous. "I know I used to oversee your rehabilitation, but you're officially discharged from the clinic now. If you're open to it, I'd really love to take you out for dinner sometime." "I honestly don't know if I'm fully ready for a relationship yet," I told him truthfully. "There's absolutely no pressure," Ryan smiled. "We can just grab a coffee or get dinner or just stay friends, whatever feels right for you." "Let's stick to coffee," I smiled back. "Let's start there." 3 hours later, we were still sitting at the corner table, talking and laughing. I caught myself genuinely laughing out loud, and it felt completely foreign. But it was a wonderful feeling. By June, I officially launched a storytelling podcast called Quiet Boundaries. The show focused on identifying financial exploitation, surviving familial betrayal, and utilizing documentation as a primary tool for self-protection. In the very first episode, I introduced myself to the audience. "My name is Juel. I'm 23 years old. 6 months ago, my mother attempted to misappropriate my accident settlement at a Sunday dinner table. I recorded the entire encounter. This podcast is everything I've learned about autonomy, silence, and drawing hard lines." I published the episode and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, the episode had accumulated over 10,000 unique downloads. The comment section was flooded with powerful responses. One listener wrote, "I started recording my family interactions today because of you. Thank you." Another added, "I genuinely believed I was the only person going through this exact nightmare." By the middle of June, the podcast had grown to over 50,000 dedicated subscribers. On June 20th, exactly 3 months had passed since I sent that definitive text to my dad. A message from him popped up on my screen. "I have successfully completed 12 consecutive weeks of professional counseling. Would you be open to meeting for a quick coffee?" I typed back a boundary, 1 hour, in a highly public space, and I will be bringing someone with me. I brought Ryan along for support. When we sat down, my dad immediately presented his official therapy attendance logs and session receipts. He had brought them explicitly to prove he wasn't exaggerating his progress. "I'm learning a lot about what it means to be an enabler," he told me, his voice heavy but steady. "I'm learning about the cost of cowardice and why staying silent makes you an accomplice to the act. I'm not sitting here asking for your immediate forgiveness, Juel. I just want you to see that I am actively putting in the work." Okay, I said, looking over his paperwork. Keep going. If you stay consistent with your sessions, we can arrange to meet up like this once a month. I will, he promised. As we stood up to leave the cafe, he looked at me tentatively. Is there anything else I can do to help support you? Yes, I told him. Keep going to therapy. That's exactly how you help. If this journey resonates with your own experiences, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments below. If you had been in my position at that dinner table, what would you have done? It is now July of 2025, 8 months since the bicycle accident on Hennepin Avenue. I am completely independent of my crutches now. Some days my leg still aches when the weather changes, but most days it feels perfectly fine. I have my own apartment, my professional training certification, and 12 active clients. My podcast has crossed 50,000 subscribers, and Ryan and I are officially dating. We are taking things incredibly slow, but we are moving forward together. As for the rest of my family, I haven't spoken a single word to my mother or my brother in 5 months. I don't know where they are, and I make a conscious effort never to look them up. The formal restraining order was never officially filed because they never attempted to breach the no-contact boundary. The absolute silence is more than enough for me. My father and I continue to meet for our monthly coffee sessions. We've met 6 times now. We aren't incredibly close, and perhaps we never fully will be, but he is actively trying, and trying is infinitely better than staying silent. Adult Protective Services officially closed their investigation back in April, citing insufficient grounds for criminal prosecution since the funds were never successfully transferred. However, the comprehensive file remains permanently on record. If they ever attempt to exploit another relative, that record will immediately be pulled. The county attorney also reviewed the perjury referral and declined to file formal criminal charges, noting that it was an internal family dispute. The petition had been withdrawn, and no actual financial loss had occurred. But like the exploitation file, that documentation leaves a permanent legal footprint. If she ever attempts to falsify an affidavit under oath again, this history will instantly surface. People often ask me if I regret pressing record that night, if the emotional fallout was truly worth it, or if I carry any lingering guilt. The answer is an absolute no, not for a single second. My mother spent my entire life teaching me that family is supposed to protect you. But when they refused to protect me, technology taught me how to protect myself. The most powerful boundary isn't shouting or screaming, it's simply pressing the record button. It's remaining entirely calm and letting someone's own words establish their accountability. At that Sunday dinner table, I didn't even blink, and looking back now, I still wouldn't change a thing. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay completely silent and let the evidence speak for itself. My name is Juel Brandt. This is my story, and every single word of it is true because I have the receipts to prove it. 他们在和解金支票上犯了第一个错误，而这就是他们的代价。My name is Amy Lowe. I am 28 years old. On Thanksgiving Day in 2025, I walked into my parents' home in Greenwich, Connecticut, wearing the same steel-toed work boots I had been wearing all day long. The leather was completely caked in dried concrete. The exact second I stepped across the threshold, my mother's gaze dropped straight to the floorboards. "Amy," she said, her voice instantly tightening with irritation. "Could you not have bothered to put on something clean for dinner?" I looked down. My boots had already left a series of dusty gray tracks across her $800 Persian rug. In an instant, 17 relatives fell completely silent. My father slammed his wine glass down onto the table, the sharp ring echoing across the dining room loud enough for every single guest to hear. "This is exactly it," he said, pointing a finger straight at me. "This is exactly why we can't have nice things in this family. Manual labor is an embarrassment to our name." My brother, Justin, sat on the couch with a smug sneer on his face. My mother snatched a linen napkin from the table and began furiously scrubbing the exact spot on the marble countertop where my hand had rested, treating me like I was contagious. Then, my 82-year-old grandfather, who had been sitting quietly at the head of the long table, slowly pushed his chair back. He stood up, locked his eyes directly onto my father, and spoke with absolute calmness. "James, do you want me to tell everyone in this room what your name used to be?" None of them had any idea what those concrete-covered boots had actually spent the last few years building. They had no clue that those very boots had walked across job sites valued at far more than the total worth of their entire estate, And they certainly didn't know that, in exactly 11 days, I would be standing on a stage in front of 300 people, including every single relative sitting at that table, while my grandfather exposed the exact truth they had spent a lifetime trying to bury. But before I reveal what happened on that stage, and the massive secret I managed to hide for years, let me take a quick moment. If this story is hitting close to home, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from, and tell me if you've ever been made to feel ashamed of the work you do. I read every single comment, so let's jump right into the history of how this all began. This story doesn't actually start at that tense Thanksgiving table. It began years ago in a town where your title on a business card dictated your entire worth as a human being. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut. If you aren't familiar with Greenwich, all you really need to know is that it is one of the wealthiest enclaves in the entire country, with a median household income well over $180,000. It's a town ruled by old money, hedge fund managers, high-powered corporate lawyers, and prominent physicians. Success here is measured by the Ivy League decals on the back of your luxury SUV and the prestige of your company name. My family relocated here in 1998 when I was just a year old. My father, James Lowe, had just established his independent financial advisory firm. My mother, Lauren, stayed at home to raise me and my younger brother, Justin, who was born 2 years later. We lived in a stunning 4-bedroom colonial home in the Riverside neighborhood, complete with immaculate crown molding and a sweeping circular driveway. Everyone in our neighborhood employed professional landscaping crews, because manual yard work was widely considered beneath our social standing. My father made an absolute point of ensuring the entire community knew we had made it. He joined the local country club, drove a pristine black BMW, and loved to brag at cocktail parties about the high net worth portfolios his firm managed. But beneath all the posturing, he was incredibly careful to conceal one major detail: his actual heritage. Because, as I would find out much later in life, my father's name hadn't always been James Lowe. He was born James Linsky. My grandfather, Samuel Linsky, had physically built half the structures in Greenwich with his own 2 hands. He spent 50 years working as a master mason, laying brick, carving stone, mixing mortar, and restoring historic facades. He specialized in the kind of structural craftsmanship designed to endure for centuries. In 1975, he founded his own business, Linsky & Sons Masonry, managing a dedicated crew of 12 laborers and regularly clocking 60-hour work weeks. He would return home every evening covered in a thick layer of gray mortar dust, and my father absolutely loathed every single second of it. It wasn't that my father lacked the skill for the trade. In fact, he was incredibly adept at it. We still have old family photographs of him at 16 years old, standing confidently on a high scaffold right next to my grandfather, holding a trowel with cement stains smeared across his jeans. In those old pictures, he looked genuinely proud and resilient, but somewhere along the line, something inside him shifted, leaving him convinced that working with your hands made you inherently inferior to the professional class. In 1995, at 25 years old, my father legally changed his last name. He had just earned his business degree from Central Connecticut State University and filed the paperwork that April. Linsky was officially erased, replaced by Lowe, a name he viewed as cleaner, simpler, more traditionally Anglo-Saxon, and vastly more professional. The official reason listed on the legal petition read, "For purposes of career advancement." My grandfather refused to speak a single word to him for 6 full months. But there was another secret buried alongside the family name, something my parents never ever brought up. My father spent 6 long years working as a commercial truck driver just to put himself through college. This wasn't some casual summer gig, it was a grueling 6-year commitment. From 1989 to 1995, he drove long-haul commercial delivery routes for Cisco Foods, navigating heavy rigs through Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. He averaged 65 hours a week behind the wheel, starting out at $12 an hour and eventually topping out at $18. Every single cent that paid for his prestigious business degree was earned through the grip of his hands on a steering wheel and the strain of his back on a loading dock. The exact moment he graduated, secured his first corporate office job, and printed his new business cards, he completely rewrote his personal history. He told my mother he had a background in corporate logistics. He told his new colleagues he came from a family of small business owners. But he never, under any circumstances, mentioned the trucks, the concrete dust, or the man who had actually taught him the meaning of hard work. By the time I was born in 1997, James Lowe was a fully established, self-made professional. The Linsky chapter was locked away. In 2003, my grandfather sold his masonry business for $180,000. It wasn't a massive windfall, just barely enough to secure a modest retirement. My father was visibly embarrassed by how small the figure was. Growing up, I was completely oblivious to these underlying dynamics. I just knew my grandfather was different from the rest of the family. He was quieter, and his hands were heavily scarred and lined with deep permanent calluses. He always wore flannel shirts and rugged work boots to our family holiday dinners, and my mother always made sure to seat him at the absolute furthest end of the table, well away from the wealthy local guests she was constantly trying to impress. And I absolutely adored him. During the summer of 2009, when I was 12 years old, he let me work alongside him for 3 months. He was handling a smaller residential contract down in Norwalk, rebuilding a stone patio for a family named the Richards. I became his official apprentice. I spent my days mixing batches of mortar and hauling heavy paving bricks across the yard. He taught me how to read a spirit level, explained why a plumb line is entirely non-negotiable, and showed me how to properly clean a trowel so it lasts for 40 years. My grandfather was incredibly patient and structured with me. He treated me like a true student of the trade, not just a kid tagging along. He paid me a real wage of $8 an hour, and I saved every single cent, accumulating $600 by the end of the summer. On our very last day on the job site, he let me personally lay a row of 15 bricks. He supervised my work, checked my alignment, and helped me tap them perfectly level. Those 15 bricks are still standing there today. Sometimes I still drive past that property just to look at them. During that summer, my grandfather told me something I have never forgotten. We were sitting on the tailgate of his old pickup truck eating deli sandwiches, our hands stained with gray stone dust. He looked over at our completed patio and said, "Amy, look at this. The person who physically built this structure, nobody is going to remember their name. But the work itself is going to keep standing long after we're gone. That is what a real legacy is. That is what your own 2 hands are capable of creating." I was only 12, so I couldn't fully grasp the depth of what he meant, but the words stuck with me. That afternoon, he took a photo of me covered in dust, holding a trowel with a massive smile on my face. When my father saw that picture later, his immediate reaction was short. "Don't let anyone see that." By the time I turned 16, the roles in our household were firmly established. Justin was the golden child of the family. He was a star lacrosse player, maintained a perfect grade point average, and went on to attend Dartmouth College. After that, he completed his MBA at NYU's Stern School of Business, and immediately landed a position as an investment banking associate at a boutique firm in Manhattan. His starting base salary was $180,000, with a guaranteed $35,000 year-end bonus. My parents happily contributed $75,000 toward his graduate tuition, proudly calling it an investment in his future. I, on the other hand, was the resident disappointment. I spent 2 semesters drifting through classes at Norwalk Community College, trying out fashion design simply because I had no idea what else to do with my life. I absolutely hated it, and by 2016, I dropped out entirely. My parents were completely mortified by my choices. My father cornered me more than once, demanding to know when I was finally going to get my life together. I ended up taking a temporary job working traffic control for a local road construction crew, holding a heavy stop sign on active job sites. The pay was $22 an hour. I spent 8 hours a day standing under the blistering sun in a high-visibility vest and steel-toed boots, listening to impatient drivers honk their horns at me. My family assumed that was the absolute ceiling for my potential. But what they didn't understand was how much I genuinely loved being on those construction sites. I spent my shifts watching the crews work. I fell in love with the sheer precision, the structural physics, and the way a project that looked like absolute chaos from the outside was actually a highly coordinated, perfectly timed operation. I started asking the crew leaders questions. How do you properly grade a roadbed? How do you successfully pour a concrete foundation in heavy rain? What are the exact weight tolerances for a steel support beam? The site supervisors realized I was serious and started giving me detailed, real-world explanations. One of the project managers, a 28-year-old civil engineer named Connor, pulled me aside one afternoon and told me I needed to look into trade school. He told me I had a natural mind for engineering and project flow, and that the industry desperately needed people who could analyze a problem and physically build the solution. So, in 2018, I enrolled in the Connecticut Academy of Construction Trades. It was a rigorous 2-year certification program covering advanced masonry and construction management. I spent my days working the traffic details and my nights sitting in classrooms. I paid for every single dollar of my tuition entirely out of my own pocket. When I graduated, my total student loan balance was exactly 0. My family never bothered to ask what I was studying. They simply assumed I was still trying to find my path in life. In 2019, I sat for my state contractor's licensing exam. It required 400 hours of intense preparation, and the state passing rate was only 52%. I passed with a score of 91. On June 12, 2020, at 23 years old, I officially became a fully licensed major contractor in the state of Connecticut under registration number MC-0392156. I was the youngest individual in the state to clear the licensing requirements that year, and I was the only woman. I chose not to tell my family, not because I felt any shame, but because I wanted to establish my business first. I wanted undeniable proof of my success before opening myself up to their judgment. On March 12, 2021, I filed the incorporation paperwork in Stamford, Connecticut, to establish Cornerstone Infrastructure, LLC. The documentation listed me as the sole owner and managing principal contractor. My very first contract was an $85,000 municipal repair project down in Norwalk. The city manager agreed to give my new firm a chance because I had worked closely with his field crews in the past, and he knew I kept an absolute schedule and delivered clean results. I wrapped up that project 3 weeks ahead of schedule and brought it in $4,000 under budget. Word-of-mouth reputation travels fast in this industry. By the conclusion of 2021, my payroll had grown to 6 full-time employees. By the end of 2022, I was managing a crew of 15. By 2023, that number expanded to 28. By the close of fiscal year 2024, Cornerstone Infrastructure was generating $8.3 million in annual gross revenue. And through all of it, my family still genuinely believed I was standing on an asphalt roadside holding a sign for $22 an hour, simply because I never saw a reason to correct them. Whenever the topic of my employment came up, which was incredibly rare, I would simply give a one-word answer: construction. In their minds, that instantly translated to unskilled manual labor, and I let them believe it. At our family dinners, whenever they made passive-aggressive comments about me working a physical job or suggested I go back to school, I would just nod politely and steer the conversation elsewhere. It was infinitely easier than trying to explain the reality of my life to them. Or perhaps deep down, I was waiting for the perfect moment. I was waiting for the evidence of my success to become so overwhelming that it would be entirely impossible for them to deny it. That exact moment arrived in October of 2025. The historic Fairfield County Town Hall structure was originally erected back in 1876. It was a magnificent piece of classic masonry, featuring towering arched windows and the kind of architectural detailing designed to look permanent. But by 2024, the structural exterior was literally crumbling away. The municipality put out a formal request for proposals for a massive historic restoration project. It required a complete overhaul of the masonry, exterior stone stabilization, window replacement, updated electrical systems, and full structural compliance, all while adhering strictly to historic preservation guidelines. It was the largest civic construction contract launched in Fairfield County in over 2 decades, with an estimated budget of $12.5 million. 9 major contracting firms submitted competitive bids. 2 were massive corporate outfits based out of Boston, 3 came down from Hartford, and 4 were local operations. My company, Cornerstone Infrastructure, was one of those local bidders. I spent 3 full weeks building that proposal. It was an 87-page document detailing our construction schedules, extensive safety metrics, insurance bonding certificates, and references from 8 successfully completed commercial projects, alongside photos of our masonry work. On October 15, 2025, I found myself sitting inside the Fairfield Municipal Complex, directly across the table from Mayor Richard Aldrich and 2 prominent members of the Town Council. My corporate attorney, Victoria Hayes, sat right next to me. Victoria was 38, a brilliant graduate of Stanford Law School, and the person who had helped me legally structure my business back in 2021. She was one of the very few people who knew exactly what I had been quietly building. Mayor Aldrich looked over my proposal documents, then looked across the table at me. Ms. Lowe, I'll be completely frank with you. When I first saw your age on the application, I was highly skeptical. But then I reviewed your firm's commercial portfolio, and I noticed that your grandfather is Samuel Linsky. I paused for a second. You know my grandfather? He personally completed the specialized brick restoration on the historic library back in 1991, the mayor said with a nod. The structure is still entirely flawless to this day, without a single stress crack in the mortar. That history tells me everything I need to know about the quality of the work you produce. We executed the contract paperwork that very afternoon. It was a $12.5 million project with an 18-month timeline. My name would be stamped on every municipal building permit, and my personal contractor license number would be registered on every single piece of state documentation. As we walked out into the parking lot, Victoria grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. Amy, do you realize what this means? Your name is going to be everywhere now. It's going to be on public records, building permits, and town press releases. You can't keep this under wraps anymore. I looked back at the historic building and smiled. I was never keeping it under wraps, Victoria. I just wasn't making any announcements. Victoria shook her head, a soft smile touching her lips. Amy, you're only 28 years old, and you just secured the single largest civic contract in the entire county. You need to learn how to step into the light and claim your achievement. I will, I promised her quietly, when the timing is exactly right. The formal press release hit the wire 5 days later. Both the Fairfield Citizen and the Connecticut Post ran concise features on the upcoming restoration. My name was right there in black and white. Amy Lowe, owner and principal contractor of Cornerstone Infrastructure, LLC. My father's wealth management firm frequently audited construction supply registries and state permit filings across Connecticut to track regional developments. Yet my name somehow completely bypassed his radar. Or perhaps he caught a glimpse of it on a compliance log somewhere and simply chose to believe it was another person entirely. But looking back, that sudden explosion at the Thanksgiving table wasn't the first time my family had made it painfully clear where I stood in their hierarchy. During our Christmas gathering in 2023, my parents hosted 22 family members. My mother had set up 2 distinct dining areas, the main formal table for the adults, and a small, unstable folding table tucked away in the far corner for the kids, specifically my younger cousins' children, who were all between the ages of 8 and 12. My mother approached me just before dinner was served, lowering her voice. Amy, honey, I was thinking you might actually feel much more comfortable sitting over at the other table, with the kids. You came straight here from a job site, and you're just looking a little, She gestured vaguely toward my hands. My hands were perfectly clean. I had scrubbed them thoroughly with industrial soap and kept my nails trimmed short, but the skin was permanently calloused and worn. Instead of starting an argument, I walked over and took a seat at the folding table, wedged tightly between an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. They spent the evening animatedly discussing Minecraft while I just smiled and nodded along. When my 8-year-old cousin, Ethan, looked up from his plate and asked, "Why are you sitting at the kids' table? You're a grown-up." I couldn't even find the words to explain it to him. The moment dessert concluded, I quietly slipped out the door at 8:45 p.m. and spent the entire drive home crying behind the wheel. Then came Easter, in 2024. Justin brought his girlfriend, Stephanie, who worked as a high-powered corporate attorney at Skadden Arps, pulling in a cool $220,000 a year. When Justin introduced me to her, he offered a dismissive chuckle. "This is Amy, my older sister. She's the one who works with her hands. General labor stuff." Stephanie gave me a tightly polite smile, the exact kind of look people give out of pure pity. Later that afternoon, I went into the kitchen to grab a drink and overheard Justin talking to her just 6 feet away on the back patio. He sighed and said, "Yeah, Amy's always been the outlier in the family. She does road work or something, filling potholes, I think. She gets defensive about it, so she doesn't really talk about her career. Honestly, I think she carries a lot of deep-seated insecurity about it." I was standing right there within earshot. I packed up my things and left early that day, too. In July of 2024, my Aunt Diane hosted a massive family reunion at her estate in Westport, with over 40 relatives in attendance. Before dinner, my father took charge of organizing a large family photograph. He stood on a lawn chair, waving everyone in, specifically calling out the names of the children who had achieved professional success. Justin, along with 4 of my cousins who were corporate attorneys, physicians, and architects. He never once called my name. I watched the entire scene play out from the dessert station 10 feet away. My father caught my eye for a brief second, then looked straight past me. That exact photo was uploaded to our extended family Facebook group later that evening, with the caption, "Deeply proud of a family that continuously builds excellence." It gathered 47 likes from our relatives. I wasn't even tagged. While everyone was finishing dessert, Aunt Diane, who is my grandfather's daughter, walked up beside me. She placed a comforting hand on my shoulder and whispered softly, "Your father is an absolute fool, Amy. Samuel told me exactly what you've been building. I am incredibly proud of you." "Thank you, Aunt Diane," I managed to say, my throat tightening as I fought back tears. At 9 p.m. that same night, my grandfather called my phone. "I saw that ridiculous family photo," he said plainly. "Notice how I wasn't in it either? That's because I was far too busy being proud of you to stand around posing for his superficial nonsense." I let out a genuine laugh, and then the tears finally spilled over. By September of 2024, my father hosted a formal business networking event at his house, bringing together 32 colleagues and high-value prospective clients. I had stopped by briefly, mistakenly assuming it was a casual family gathering. The moment I walked through the door and realized it was a corporate function, I knew I should have turned around and walked out. But my father spotted me near the entryway. He walked over and introduced me to one of his primary developers, a prominent real estate mogul named Doug Parsons. "Doug, this is my son Justin, who's making incredible strides in investment banking, and, He paused, looking at me with a wave of discomfort. "This is Amy. She's currently taking some personal time to figure out what direction she wants to take with her life." I stood there in a pair of clean jeans and a tailored blouse. I shook Doug's hand firmly, offered a polite smile, and immediately walked out to my truck. I had lasted exactly 12 minutes, and once again, I spent the drive home crying. 3 weeks later, my firm secured the $12.5 million municipal contract. Doug Parsons was one of the key decision-makers sitting on that selection committee, and he had cast an enthusiastic vote in my favor. He had absolutely no idea I was James Lowe's daughter, simply because my father had spent my entire adult life acting like I didn't exist. On October 19, 2024, just 4 days after winning the Fairfield contract, we celebrated my mother's 58th birthday. They held a formal dinner at the Capitol Grill in Stamford, ironically located just 15 minutes away from my corporate office. 6 of us sat around the table, my parents, Justin, Stephanie, and me. Right in the middle of the appetizers, my mother began discussing my life choices as if I weren't sitting a mere 4 feet away from her. "I just worry about her constantly, James," she said, sighing deeply to my father. "She's 28 years old. She doesn't have a corporate career, she doesn't have a partner, and she spends her entire life working outside in the elements. What kind of a life is that for a young woman?" Justin chipped in, swirling his wine. "Maybe we need to organize some kind of formal intervention. Get her an appointment with a professional career consultant." My father shook his head dismissively. "She's entirely stubborn. She takes directly after her grandfather." My grandfather hadn't attended the dinner that night because he was feeling too exhausted. I sat there in silence, pushing a salad around my plate without uttering a word. Stephanie looked visibly uncomfortable with the conversation and tried her best to pivot to a different topic, but the emotional damage was already done. When the desserts arrived, including a slice of my favorite chocolate cake, my mother slid it toward me. "At least eat a few bites of cake, sweetie. You're looking terribly thin. Are you even eating enough?" I declined politely, excusing myself to the restroom. I sat inside a locked stall for 6 minutes, staring down at the tile floor, slowly deep breathing until my composure returned. When I walked back to the table, I picked up my bag. "I have an early site inspection tomorrow morning, so I need to head out." It was only 8:45 p.m., and these family dinners routinely lasted until at least 9:30 p.m. I placed a $60 bill flat on the table to cover my portion of the meal and walked out before the final check was ever printed. While standing in that restaurant restroom, I had stared directly at my reflection in the mirror. I forced myself to picture the fully executed contract sitting inside my office safe, the municipal permit stamped with my legal name, and the $12.5 million valuation. I told myself, just endure this for 1 more month. Once everything goes public, you will never have to sit through another dinner like this again. The week following Thanksgiving, an elegant envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was a formal invitation to Justin's wedding, scheduled for June 14, 2026, at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. They were anticipating over 300 guests, with a projected budget tracking between $80,000 and $100,000. Out of pure family obligation, I had been designated as a bridesmaid. But across the bottom of the elegant card, Stephanie had added a handwritten note. Amy, no +1 permitted due to unpredictable construction schedules. Every single other relative had been granted a guest accommodation. Even my cousin Emily's boyfriend of a mere 3 months had received a formal invitation. But I was explicitly excluded because my work schedule was unpredictable. At the time, I had been seriously dating a wonderful man named Connor for 8 months, the very same project manager who had encouraged me to pursue trade school back in 2018. I had deliberately avoided introducing him to my parents because I knew exactly how they would judge his life. He worked in commercial construction, wore heavy work boots, and drove a pickup truck. He was the exact definition of the blue-collar lifestyle they openly looked down upon. When I told Connor about the restriction on the wedding invitation, he just shrugged. Forget them. You don't need their permission to bring me anywhere. I placed the wedding invitation flat on my office desk, right next to the official program for the December 8th awards gala. Looking at those two documents side by side felt like staring at two completely conflicting versions of my own existence, one where I was entirely invisible and another where my work was highly celebrated. I knew I had to choose which reality was truly mine. On December 3rd, 2025, just 5 days prior to the gala, I drove out to my grandfather's home in Norwalk. It was a modest, well-kept 3-bedroom Cape Cod house that he had purchased back in 1978. After my grandmother, Martha, passed away in 2019, he had completely avoided clearing out the storage spaces. We spent the afternoon sorting through decades of old cardboard boxes in the attic, and that's exactly when we uncovered it. It was an old Budweiser box with thick black marker across the top that read, Linsky Masonry, 1975 to 2003. Inside were 47 vintage photographs, including 12 corporate prints that featured the original company logo, Linsky & Sons Masonry. My grandfather sat flat on the attic floorboards right next to me, gently pulling out a print from 1984. It featured my father at 16, standing proudly on a high scaffold in mortar-stained jeans, with his arm slung tightly around my grandfather's shoulder. Both of them were laughing into the camera. My grandfather's voice began to waver as he held the print. This was your father before he completely forgot who he was, before he chose to bury his own heritage. He was an incredible mason, Amy, truly magnificent, strong, proud, and meticulous. But then something shifted. He went off to college. Perhaps the corporate world convinced him that where he came from wasn't prestigious enough. I don't know, but he used to look at me with the exact same pride that you have in your eyes right now. He paused to wipe his eyes. I deeply miss that boy. At the very bottom of the box, I discovered 2 legal documents. The first was an official birth certificate for James Michael Linsky, born on March 3, 1970. The second was a formal court decree, a legal name change petition filed on April 15, 1995, and approved on May 2, 1995. The listed justification read, Professional Name Preference. I looked up at my grandfather, tears streaming down his face. He leaned back against the rafters and recalled the day my father confronted him. He told me, Dad, you have to understand. No corporate firm is going to hire a Linsky. It sounds far too blue-collar. My grandfather had looked at him and said, Son, that name is exactly what built everything you are. But my father simply replied, Dad, that name is going to bury my career. My grandfather's voice broke completely, and he had to step out of the attic to catch his breath. As I continued sorting through the remaining items in the box, I found one more piece of history. It was a handwritten letter, spanning a single page in faded blue ink, dated September 12, 2010. It was addressed directly to my father, but the envelope lacked a stamp. It had never been mailed. The text read, James, I am incredibly proud of everything you have achieved. Your firm, your beautiful estate, your corporate success. But please, never forget the foundation we built it on. Those hands you try so hard to hide didn't just construct physical buildings, they constructed the man you are today. Now, Amy has those exact same hands. Please don't ever make her feel ashamed of them the way you became ashamed of yours. Love, Dad. I held the letter in my hands, realizing it had sat in that box for 15 years. It was written when I was just 13 years old. My grandfather walked back in, looking at the paper. I lost my nerve, he admitted softly. I assumed it would only alienate him further. Perhaps if I had sent it, things would have turned out differently for our family. I carefully folded the page and slipped it securely into my wallet. I'll carry it for you from now on, Grandpa, I said. On December 7th, 2025, the evening before the awards gala, I wrapped up my duties at the office at 6 p.m. and began the drive home. My route took me directly past the street where my parents lived. I slowed my truck down as I passed their property, observing the warm lights glowing through the windows. It was just a typical Sunday evening with the family gathered inside. I didn't pull into the driveway, I just kept driving. In that moment, a powerful realization hit me. I no longer required their validation. Not for the business I was building, not for my professional success, and certainly not for my own existence. I arrived back at my apartment at 7:15 p.m., ordered some Thai takeout, and spent the evening completely relaxed. At 9 p.m., I unboxed the brand new pair of work boots I had purchased specifically for the gala event. They were premium Timberland Pros, the exact same heavy-duty style I wore to the job sites every single day, but these were pristine, polished, and completely unblemished. I set them down directly alongside my suit, a sharp charcoal gray theory pantsuit that had cost me $848 at the Nordstrom in Greenwich just 3 days prior. I remembered the sales associate asking what kind of event I was attending. A formal recognition dinner, I had told her. Oh, wonderful, she smiled. What field are you in? I'm a general contractor. She had paused, looking slightly confused by my response. This particular tailoring seems a bit corporate for that line of work. That's entirely the point, I replied. Now the clean work boots sat directly next to the tailored suit, two equal expressions of the exact same identity. I barely slept that night. I woke up at 2 a.m., pacing around my bathroom and quietly rehearsing my acceptance speech under my breath so as not to disturb my neighbors. I had drafted 6 separate versions, and this was the absolute final layout. It was exactly 380 words, timed perfectly at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It focused entirely on Samuel, the value of craftsmanship, legacy, and the inherent dignity of the work itself over corporate titles. It contained no direct references to my immediate family, but the underlying message was unmistakable. I returned to bed and woke up naturally at 5:30 a.m. without needing an alarm. December 8th, 2025. The day everything completely shifted. The Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art is located up in Hartford, roughly 85 miles north of Greenwich. I departed my apartment at 4:30 p.m., driving my Ford F-250 pickup truck. When I pulled up to the main entrance, the valet attendant looked completely startled, given that the line of arriving guests consisted entirely of luxury BMWs and Mercedes sedans. I handed him a $10 tip and walked inside. I was escorted directly to the honoree reception lounge. There were 6 award recipients in total, 4 men ranging in age from late 40s to mid-60s, a 54-year-old woman, and me at 28. One of the senior men struck up a conversation asking about my specialization. I'm a general contractor, I stated plainly. Oh, so you handle corporate project management? No, I clarified. I own and operate a heavy infrastructure construction firm. His expression shifted into complete surprise. How old are you? 28. Wow, he murmured, blinking. That is an incredible achievement for your age. I simply smiled and let the conversation rest. At 6:45 p.m., the event coordinator stepped into the lounge. 15 minutes until showtime, everyone. The guests and family members are currently taking their seats in the main auditorium. I glanced out toward the formal seating area. Somewhere out in that massive crowd, my parents were taking their places at table 8, a premier corporate sponsor table. They had checked in right at 6:15 p.m., a fact I knew because I had verified the registration sheets. They had absolutely no inkling that I was even in the building. At exactly 6:52 p.m., my father casually flipped open the evening's formal program. As he scanned down the page, he froze entirely on page 8. Every ounce of color instantly drained from his face. My mother leaned closer, looking concerned. James, what is it? Without a word, he handed the booklet over to her, pointing directly at the center heading. She looked down, and her hand immediately flew to her mouth in shock. Right there was a professional corporate headshot of me taken in my Stamford office. The bold caption alongside it read, Amy Lowe, owner and principal contractor of Cornerstone Infrastructure, LLC, recipient of the Excellence in Preservation Award for the $12.5 million Fairfield County Historic Town Hall Restoration Project. Justin noticed their reaction across the table. What's going on? What are you guys looking at? My father slid the program over to him. Justin stared at the page in absolute disbelief, then quickly pulled out his phone to search Cornerstone Infrastructure, Connecticut. My corporate website loaded instantly, displaying our active projects, alongside field photos of me standing on active job sites in a hard hat with a blueprint clipboard, clearly directing the crews. He tapped on the Our Team profile page, bringing up my professional biography, engineering credentials, and state master contractor license number. He turned the screen toward my parents. This is completely impossible, my mother whispered frantically. Amy works on a basic road crew. She's a traffic flagger making $22 an hour. My father's jaw clenched tightly. She never said a word to us. We assumed. Justin continued scrolling through the regional news links, pulling up an industry feature from October titled Fairfield County Awards Massive Historic Restoration Contract to Local Firm. He read a quote from the article aloud in a low voice. Principal contractor Amy Lowe, 28, states the project serves as a direct tribute to the historic craftsmanship of the master tradesman who laid the original foundation. An absolute suffocating silence descended over Table 8. Doug Parsons, my father's high-profile development client and the very committee member who had greenlit my proposal, leaned over from his seat nearby. Jim, is that brilliant young contractor your daughter? Outstanding work. I proudly cast my vote for her firm during the Fairfield review process. I had absolutely no idea she was family. She is an absolute force in the regional industry. My father sat entirely speechless, unable to form a response. The main house lights began to dim across the auditorium, and a booming voice resonated through the house speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our master of ceremonies for the evening, Dr. Richard Aldrich. My father reached over and gripped my mother's hand with incredible force. James, what on earth are we supposed to do? She whispered anxiously. We sit here, my father replied through gritted teeth, and we pray to God she doesn't humiliate our name in front of 300 professionals. Justin muttered quietly under his breath. I think we already took care of that ourselves. Dr. Richard Aldrich stepped up to the podium. He was a distinguished, silver-haired gentleman in his early 60s who had served as the mayor of Fairfield for over 15 years. Our next recognition tonight, he announced into the microphone, celebrates absolute excellence in historic preservation. Built back in 1876, the Fairfield County Historic Town Hall had fallen into severe structural decay. Countless regional firms reviewed the site and declared it entirely unsalvageable within a standard civic budget. But one specific contractor, a young woman who learned the core tenets of the trade from her grandfather, a master mason, saw a potential that everyone else missed. She recognized a structural legacy and a piece of history that was absolutely worth saving. Behind him, a massive projector screen illuminated the room. It displayed a historic archive photo of the town hall from 1876, followed by a current photo from 2024 showing crumbling exterior brickwork and fractured windows. Then, my firm's detailed engineering schematics and architectural blueprints flashed onto the screen, stamped clearly with my name and state license number, MC-0392156. Dr. Aldrich continued over the applause. She submitted the winning structural proposal for a $12.5 million restoration, and at just 28 years of age, she officially becomes the youngest general contractor in Connecticut history to secure a civic contract of this magnitude. The auditorium erupted into applause. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct privilege to present the Excellence in Preservation Award to the owner and principal contractor of Cornerstone Infrastructure, LLC, Amy Lowe. The crowd went wild. I stepped out from the wings of the stage. My brand-new, polished Timberland work boots made a sharp, rhythmic click-click-click sound across the polished hardwood floor. Media cameras began flashing instantly as 300 people stood up to deliver a roaring standing ovation. I glanced over at Table 8. My father sat entirely frozen in his seat. My mother's hand remained pressed against her mouth in absolute shock, and Justin was just staring down at his phone screen. Then I looked over at Table 12. My grandfather was standing straight, tears streaming down his face, with his hand pressed firmly against his heart. I approached the podium, shook Dr. Aldrich's hand, and turned to face the crowded auditorium. "Thank you, everyone," I began clearly into the microphone. "I am deeply honored to accept this recognition tonight, but I do not stand on this stage alone. I am standing squarely on the shoulders of every single tradesman who ever taught me that construction is not merely a job, it is a profound calling. My grandfather, Samuel Lenski, spent 50 years working as a master mason. He was the man who taught me that your own two hands can build a lasting legacy. He showed me that the inherent value of craftsmanship will always carry more weight than a corporate title, and that you never require someone else's permission to build something of true significance. All you need is technical skill, unyielding integrity, and the courage to stamp your name on the final product." When I first launched my firm 4 years ago, the skeptics were loud. I was young, I was a woman, and I came from a family background that placed its value entirely on a very different definition of success. But I quickly learned a vital truth. The people who doubt your potential are entirely irrelevant to your journey. The people who recognize your true value are the ones who will walk the path alongside you. The Fairfield County Historic Town Hall was originally erected in 1876 by artisans whose names have long been lost to history, yet their physical labor continues to stand firm today. By the time our restoration wraps up in 2027, my greatest hope is that when citizens walk through those historic doors, they will remember that someone cared enough to preserve that foundation, someone who respected our shared past while building toward the future. My grandfather always told me, "Let your physical work speak infinitely louder than a corporate business card." I believe that with everything I have, but I've also come to understand that names carry an immense weight. The name you choose to carry, the name you carry with absolute pride, and the name you refuse to let anyone bury. To anyone who has ever been told that their labor wasn't prestigious enough, smart enough, or valuable enough, this award belongs entirely to you. To everyone who uses their hands and their heart to build our world, thank you so much. The entire room erupted into a thunderous, sustained standing ovation that echoed through the hall for minutes. I held the heavy crystal award firmly in my hands, reading the engraving. Amy Lowe, Excellence in Preservation, 2025. As I began to step away from the podium, an entirely unexpected movement caught my eye. My grandfather had stepped out into the center aisle and was walking directly toward the stage. His pace was slow but completely deliberate. The event staff looked momentarily uncertain, but nobody made a move to stop him. He was 82 years old, and nobody was about to tackle an elderly man at a formal gala. He walked right up to the stage, climbed the steps, and took the microphone from the stand. The room fell into an immediate, curious hush. My grandfather stood behind the podium, looking out at the 300 corporate professionals in attendance. "Please forgive the interruption, everyone," he spoke into the microphone, his voice carrying a raspy strength. "My name is Samuel Lenski. I am Amy's grandfather. I wasn't scheduled to speak this evening, but I am 82 years old, and I have remained silent for far too long. The young woman standing right here is my granddaughter. Her true, complete name is Amy Lenski Lowe. She has just engineered a business achievement far beyond anything I ever dreamed of, and in doing so, she has reclaimed the exact heritage her own father spent a lifetime trying to bury. 4 decades ago, my son, James Lowe, who is sitting right over there at table 8, legally altered his last name. He did it because he felt a deep sense of shame for being the son of a manual laborer. He was ashamed of these very hands. He raised his hands high above the podium, displaying fingers that were heavily lined with thick calluses and decades of structural scars. These hands physically built half the foundations in Greenwich. These hands earned the money that paid for his university education, and these hands were the ones he chose to label an embarrassment. Just 2 weeks ago at our family Thanksgiving dinner, he openly told Amy that her career was a disgrace to the family name. Because she works in commercial construction, because she wears work boots, and because she dedicates herself to the exact same honest labor that he used to perform before he decided it wasn't good enough for his social standing. Amy had absolutely no idea I was going to stand up here and say this tonight. But I made a solemn promise to myself that if she ever received the professional recognition she rightly earned, I would make absolutely certain that the real truth was known to everyone in this room. The Lenski name is not an embarrassment. It is a legacy of hard work, and she is carrying that legacy forward with incredible honor. James, you are my son, and I love you dearly, but you were entirely wrong. Tonight, in front of all your colleagues, the record is being set completely straight. Our heritage, and her name, is something to be profoundly proud of." He carefully set the microphone down, turned, and walked back down the steps toward table 12 to resume his seat. The entire auditorium sat in a stunned, breathless silence for 5 long seconds. Then, a single person began to clap. Within moments, the applause swelled, turning into a massive second standing ovation as the entire room stood up to honor my grandfather and the raw truth he had just delivered. I stood just off camera in the wings of the stage, tears streaming down my face. 20 minutes later, while I was in the media reception room completing my formal press photographs, my father walked through the door. "Amy," he said, his voice incredibly tight and strained as he tried to maintain his composure. I turned around to face him. "We need to have a conversation, right now." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Dad, we don't, at least not tonight. You completely humiliated me in front of every single one of my primary clients and corporate colleagues," he hissed under his breath. I carefully set my Crystal Award down on the table and took a step closer to him. "I didn't humiliate you, Dad. I simply stepped up and accepted an award that I worked corporate hours to earn. You humiliated yourself the exact moment you decided my entire life was completely worthless." His face flushed a deep red. "You lied to us this entire time." "I never lied to you a day in my life," I countered coldly. "The reality is that you and Mom never bothered to ask. You deliberately let us believe that—" "You chose to believe that, Dad. You chose to believe that I was completely incapable of becoming anyone outside of the narrow, disappointing box you built for me." My mother stepped into the room behind him, her eyes red from crying. "Amy, please, can we just sit down as a family and talk about this?" "Not tonight, Mom," I said, shaking my head. "I have media interviews to complete, and there are people out there who genuinely want to celebrate my success. You and Dad are free to go home." My mother began to weep openly. "But we are so incredibly proud of you." I cut her off instantly. "Stop. Please don't do this now. Don't start pretending. I needed you to be proud of me 2 years ago. I needed you to be proud of me 4 years ago when I was risking everything to launch this firm. When I secured my very first commercial contract, where were you?" Total silence filled the room. My father attempted to soften his posture. "Amy, we honestly had no idea. The truth is that you didn't want to know, Dad. And there is a massive legal difference between those two things." I turned my back on them, walking directly toward my grandfather, my project foreman Paul, and my attorney Victoria, the people who had actually stood by me and watched me grow. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling out my name, but I kept walking forward. It wasn't that I didn't love them, it was simply that I had finally learned to love myself more. 15 minutes later, Justin approached me near the exit. "Amy, hey!" I was standing in a circle with Grandpa, Paul, and Victoria. Justin kept his hands shoved deep into his suit pockets, looking incredibly sheepish as he walked over. I wanted to come over and say I'm truly sorry," he stammered. "I had absolutely no idea about your firm, none at all." I looked at him calmly. "I know you didn't, Justin, but ask yourself this. Over the last 4 years, how many times did you ever actually ask me a genuine question about my career? Without making a joke, without talking down to me, just out of sincere curiosity?" He dropped his gaze, unable to answer. "That's exactly what I thought," I said softly. "Can we try to start over?" he asked tentatively. "Perhaps down the road, but definitely not tonight. Tonight I'm going to spend my time celebrating with the people who have actually been in my corner from day one." Justin looked around the circle, meeting the eyes of my grandfather, Paul, and Victoria. He got the message. "I'm going to head out then," he said, turning to leave. He paused for a second, then looked back over his shoulder. "For what it's worth, Amy, that speech was absolutely incredible. I'm sorry I failed to see how amazing you really are." "Thank you, Justin," I said sincerely. As he walked away, a completely unexpected wave of emotion washed over me. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't some petty sense of revenge. It was just a deep, lingering sadness for all the years of connection we had completely lost out on. My grandfather reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small piece of paper. It was a vintage photograph from the attic box, dated 1985. It featured my father at 15 and my grandfather at 42, both standing on a high brick scaffold covered in dry mortar dust, smiling with their arms around each other. On the back, my grandfather's handwriting read, "Linsky and Sons Masonry, the Morrison Project, Summer 1985. Deeply proud of my boy. My grandfather's voice was incredibly gentle as I looked at the image. That was him before the corporate world made him feel small, Amy. He was a phenomenal tradesman. Strong, resilient, and proud. I'm not standing here asking you to forgive his behavior tonight, but perhaps somewhere in the future you can find a way. He is my son, and you are my granddaughter, and I love you both with everything I have. I carefully slid the vintage photograph into my wallet alongside the letter. Thank you, Grandpa. I officially departed the gala at 9:30 p.m., saying my goodbyes to my crew in Victoria before heading out to the valet lot. I climbed into the cab of my F250 and sat there for 5 minutes without turning the key in the ignition. The Crystal Award sat safely wrapped in my coat on the passenger seat. My phone was vibrating continuously with 89 unread notifications, but I left it face down. I just sat in the quiet cab, letting the sheer exhaustion, relief, pride, and sadness settle over me. I finally started the truck and began the hour-and-a-half drive back down Interstate 84 West to the Merritt Parkway, pulling into my Stamford apartment at 10:55 p.m. I brought the award inside, setting it on the shelf directly next to the framed photograph of my grandfather and me from that summer of 2009. It was the perfect spot for it. Standing there in my tailored suit and my clean work boots, a profound sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in my entire life, I realized I no longer had to prove my worth to anyone. I was completely enough, and I always had been. They were just too blind to see it. The following morning, I woke up to over 200 notifications. The regional news outlets, the Hartford Courant, the Connecticut Post, and the Fairfield Citizen had all run major features on the event. One headline read, "Young infrastructure contractor claims top honors amid emotional tribute from master mason grandfather." My phone was flooded with text messages from extended relatives, ranging from enthusiastic congratulations to complete confusion as to why I had kept my business a secret. I replied politely to the ones who had genuinely supported me and entirely ignored the rest. Later that afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown corporate number. "Hello, Miss Lowe. This is the editorial department at the Hartford Business Journal. We are currently compiling our annual 30 Under 30 feature, and we would love to schedule an exclusive profile on your firm's recent civic expansion." 2 months later, in late January of 2026, Cornerstone Infrastructure was absolutely booming. We had just finalized 2 additional commercial contracts totaling $6.8 million, with a third major project currently moving through underwriting. I had expanded our crew by 4 additional full-time tradesmen, bringing our total company payroll to 39 employees. To accommodate the growth, I officially signed a commercial lease to expand our corporate office space to 1,600 square feet. But the physical business wasn't the only thing that had transformed. On January 15th, a handwritten 2-page letter arrived at my office from my father. The text read, "Amy, I don't honestly know how to properly begin this letter outside of saying, I am deeply sorry. I was entirely wrong about your potential, wrong about the value of your profession, and completely wrong about what actually constitutes success in this life. I spent 40 long years desperately running away from my blue-collar roots because I convinced myself it was a mark against my character. But you proved to me that our history is a foundation to build upon, not something to hide. You took the exact name I chose to bury and forced the entire regional industry to respect it. You built an enterprise I never had the courage to build myself. I am incredibly proud of you, Amy. I should have said these words to you years ago, and I am saying them now even though I know it might be too late. Can we please arrange a time to talk? Dad." I let the letter sit on my desk for 13 days before I finally picked up my phone and sent a short text response. "Let's get a coffee." We met on January 28th at a quiet Starbucks in Stamford, spending 2 hours sitting at a corner table. For the first time in my entire life, I watched my father break down and weep openly. He apologized for everything. The Thanksgiving confrontation, the decades of dismissive comments, the legal name change, and his complete failure to see me for who I truly was. "I forgive you, Dad," I told him calmly, "but you need to understand that the dynamic has completely changed. I am no longer a child seeking your approval. If you want to have a relationship with me going forward, it will be entirely on my terms." He agreed without a single moment of hesitation. Before we wrapped up, he asked tentatively if he could visit one of my active job sites. I was completely caught off guard by the request, but I agreed to let him stop by. On February 5th, he drove out to the Fairfield Town Hall restoration site. He stood quietly beyond the safety perimeter for 3 full hours, watching as I directed our engineering crews and seeing the absolute professional respect my team held for my leadership. When the shift wrapped up, he walked over and looked up at the massive, historic facade. "You are an infinitely better contractor than I ever was, Amy," he said softly. "Our family dynamic is still far from perfectly healed, and we may never fully become the ideal family unit my parents always tried to project, but the lines of communication are officially open." On February 1st, Justin formally joined Cornerstone Infrastructure as our primary corporate financial consultant, accepting a 50% salary reduction from his previous investment banking compensation package. He is actively learning the logistical mechanics of the construction industry and proving his commitment to the firm every single day. The underlying tension between us has dissolved, and the natural, supportive sibling dynamic we lacked for years is slowly beginning to take root. My mother now calls my phone every Thursday evening at exactly 7 p.m., a consistent routine she started back in mid-December. Our conversations have steadily evolved from superficial small talk into much deeper, more authentic discussions. She began seeing a professional counselor to address her own role in enabling the family's toxic perfectionism. On January 22nd, she stepped into my corporate headquarters for the very first time. The moment her eyes landed on my Crystal Preservation Award and the field photos of my crews lining the conference room walls, she broke down in tears of genuine pride. Back on December 20th, 2025, I officially established the Linsky Vocational Scholarship Fund with an initial personal endowment of $250,000. The foundation provides targeted 4-year grants of $50,000 to working-class students pursuing advanced degrees in the skilled trades. Within the first 3 weeks of launching the application portal, we received 47 submissions. Our very first scholarship recipient was a brilliant 19-year-old woman from Bridgeport named Maria Gonzalez. Her mother had spent 20 consecutive years working as a commercial night cleaner to support their family of 3. Maria's primary dream was to become a master mason, a goal inspired by her late uncle who had tragically lost his life in a commercial construction accident back in 2019. She was pursuing the trade explicitly to honor his legacy. On January 16th, we hosted a small celebratory reception for the scholarship recipients at our corporate office. Maria, her entire family, my grandfather, and my core construction crews were all in attendance. I stood up and delivered a brief 3-minute speech about the enduring value of the trades. After the applause died down, Maria's mother, Rosa, walked up and took hold of my hands. Her palms were incredibly rough, heavily calloused from 2 decades of hard manual labor. She looked at me with immense gratitude and said, "You have given my daughter the absolute right to be proud of the work her hands can do, the exact same way your grandfather did for you." As I watched her, I thought to myself, this is it. This is exactly why we build. We aren't just laying brick and pouring concrete. We're constructing a future and a legacy. We're doing this so the next generation never has to apologize for the honest work of their hands. By late January, the Fairfield project was 45% complete and running well ahead of schedule. I was out on the site training a new apprentice named Sophie. She was 22 and had just started with us on January 6th. We were taking our lunch break, sitting on the tailgate of my pickup truck, and eating sandwiches we'd grabbed from a local food truck. She looked over at me and asked, "Amy, can I ask you a personal question?" "Go for it," I said. "When you first got into this trade, did your family support you, or were you completely on your own?" I paused for a moment, looking down at my boots. They were the exact same Timberlands I had worn to the awards gala. Now they were properly broken in, marked with scuffs and faint concrete stains. After 8 weeks of intense fieldwork, they fit perfectly. "Not at first," I told her. They thought I was making a massive mistake and wasting my potential, but I didn't wait around for their approval. I built this company because I believed in it with everything I had. Eventually, a few of them came around. My dad and I actually grabbed coffee 2 weeks ago, which was our first real conversation in years. Some people never change, and honestly, that's fine too, because either way, I built something that belongs entirely to me. Something real and meaningful. "That takes a lot of guts," Sophie said, nodding. I shook my head. "No, it's just honest labor. That's all it ever was." By 4:30 p.m., the workday was over. Sophie packed up her tools and waved as she walked away. "See you tomorrow, Amy." I stayed behind for a bit, walking the site alone. I inspected the stone masonry, running my hand along the fresh brickwork and checking the setting of the mortar. Then I took a few steps back, just looking up at the structure. It was only half restored, but it was absolutely beautiful. A deep, quiet sense of pride settled over me. On my drive home, I passed the street where my parents lived. That heavy, suffocating feeling in my chest was completely gone. There was only peace, maybe even a tiny hint of warmth. My own apartment finally felt like home now, a true sanctuary. By late January, my office told the entire story of my journey. The shelving held my awards: the 2025 Excellence in Preservation Award, the 2024 Women in Construction Honor, and my official Hartford Business Journal 30 Under 30 certificate. In a beautiful glass display case sat my grandfather's original trowel, elegantly engraved with the words, Samuel Linsky, 1943 to 2026. He is still very much alive, healthy, and here to witness every single milestone. Hanging across the walls were 12 framed photographs documenting the gala night, Samuel's incredible speech, our scholarship launch, the ongoing site progress, and our team celebrations. Right beside them was a framed quote I had printed out after the gala. It read, "Legacy is not something you are given. It is something you build." It was the exact advice Samuel had given me when I was just 12 years old. On January 5th, I officially updated my corporate signage. It now reads, Cornerstone Infrastructure, LLC, Amy Linsky Lowe, owner and licensed major contractor, number MC 392156. Honoring the legacy of Linsky Masonry, established 1975. The exact moment my grandfather read that final line, he wept. 3 active project blueprints lay laid out across my desk, alongside a bright yellow hard hat embroidered with the name, A Linsky Lowe. Right next to it sat a coffee mug my crew had gifted me, printed with the words, Best Boss. On my wrist, I wore Samuel's vintage 1985 Timex watch. The leather strap was incredibly soft and worn, and I made a habit of winding it manually every single morning. There was also a new photograph on my desk, framed on January 20th. It featured me, my grandfather, and Paul from the night of the gala, all dressed up and smiling brilliantly. The handwritten caption across the bottom read, My true family. I still wear my heavy work boots. Except now, whenever I walk into a professional room, people stand up out of respect. Not because I spent my life trying to prove my family wrong, but because I proved to myself that I was entirely right. The Linsky name is no longer buried. It is stamped on my contractor's license, printed on my corporate business cards, and registered on public building permits that will endure for the next 100 years. My grandfather taught me that your worth should never be measured by a corporate job title your parents expect of you. True worth is measured by the legacy you build with your own 2 hands. I didn't build this enterprise to make a point or seek revenge. I built it because this is who I am. This is who I have always been. My name is Amy Linsky Lowe. I am a licensed general contractor. I own and operate a multi-million-dollar infrastructure firm. I wear heavy work boots, my hands get covered in dirt, and I construct realities designed to stand the test of time. And I am deeply proud. Not out of arrogance for being right, but because I never once stopped believing that I could achieve this. It's late January now. My company is thriving, my family dynamics are slowly beginning to heal, and my grandfather is right here to witness it all unfold. Every single morning when I wake up, I no longer feel the need to hide who I am. That is the real victory. It isn't about the industry awards or the public vindication. It's about the absolute freedom to be entirely yourself. These boots have traveled an incredibly long road, from my grandfather's job site when I was 12, to that painful Thanksgiving dinner where I was labeled an embarrassment, and finally onto a grand stage where 300 professionals stood to applaud my work. Today, they walk across my own active construction sites, operating under my own rules and laying down my own legacy. If you are currently hiding your true potential because someone in your life told you that your choices weren't good enough, please stop. Go out and build your vision anyway. When your achievements become too massive for the world to ignore, people will have no choice but to see you. And on the day they finally do see you, you won't even require their validation anymore, because you will have already discovered the only validation that truly matters.